Staying attuned, a poetic gaze, backwards and forward, with folks both brilliant and humble.
Soulful courage voice, a heart with big beats offered, paying it forward. Our guest today is Lisa Veronica Wood. She is a parent, artist, and advocate of good trouble and extreme acts of kindness. Like all our guests, she has many other things too, and we will dive into that now. So I'm going to read a poem.
Okay.
It's called Out Profound One Another. Who's to say today we say many things as we sit with an insecure stare, emboldened to say something that sounds profound, deep with limitless impact and a slight scare, scoring, we think, to imprint atop of some previously manufactured scarred skin. But what we say helps much less than what we think, and to speak, to be remembered, is to sneak a shot of egoed poison and hope to live. But life leads us fully back to the place where we are so occupied trying to sound than trying to hear, that our companions, some friends dear, take our obsession of self to mean a neglect, to mean a disinterest, and to feel a feeling match. You both like yourselves a little less.
Holy crap. I love the title, and it did not disappoint. It lived up to the title. Would you say that title again? To something profound, impress?
To out-profound one another.
To out-profound one another. That just kind of also reminds me of like when you were talking about hearing and not being heard, right? And that whole thing of like the people who are listening to you just thinking about what they're gonna say and not really listening, you know, is kind of like what that reminds me of. And yeah, if your aim is just to wow people with your eloquence or how cool you know this little soundbite is, that's not communication, you know. And I love the whole point of it, like the whole idea that you're making yourself so self-important that the person listening is not only not impressed, but they're feeling like you're giving them lip service and you're not actually engaging with them, and they feel neglected and they feel lesser and also look at you as lesser because they feel lesser in your eyes, but then also criticize you and like, you know, demote you in their minds of like, yeah, this person wasn't who I thought they were. They're not at least who I thought they were to me, you know, kind of. That's really cool.
Yeah, it almost sounds as if diminishing returns. The harder I try to impress you, the less impressed you are.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if people are actually paying attention, I mean, that's not always the case. That's how we have Trump in office, right? Like, you could be that grandiose and talk a good game and sell it and like just say little talking points, and there's people who aren't really listening and will be impressed. And we've all seen people that were like, why do people think they're great at this? How do somebody derive that they're an artist? You know, where we're just like, is anybody seeing what I'm seeing? You know, like they seem very false and they seem very full of themselves and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, her or him, you know?
Yeah.
So, but I think, yeah, the person, if you are really seeking to, you know, connect with somebody at a greater level, at an emotional or soulful level, and that really is your aim, to be profound and try to impress them is not going to go there. You know, is not really going to be the connection. If you want to hoodwink somebody or, you know, have some like show and, you know, glam it up and like fool them into thinking you're amazing, that'll work. You can be talking, profound, weird bullshit, but that you think sounds amazing, and they're like, oh yes, that sounds amazing. But if connection and actual conversation is the aim, then yeah. I mean, there's a great book that just came out, I think this year or last year, called Brevity, and it's all about how the less complex you are in your words and your speaking, the better it resonates, the more truthful people think you are, and all of that, that unfortunately, I love words, and my husband will make fun of me, like, I don't think about big words, they're just in my head from reading, and he'll make fun of me, like, oh, your forehead, you mean like, oh, this, or, like,
There's a simpler word for forehead?
Wait, he did have, and I couldn't think of it now. I'm like, what was
Can't think of that one. I don't know.
Yeah, like, there was something, like, he was making fun of me but, I don't know, there's other words.
Yeah.
What was the word? Damn it. Because I was like...
Well, you say extraneous, and he says unnecessary.
Yeah.
Not needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll say verbose. It could be wordy.
Right,
those kind of things. It's just like, I'm not thinking, like, I need to use this big word.
Yeah, that brings me to an interesting, like, so I can go backwards from what you said, but that first part this last part, most recent part about sort of word choice.
Yeah.
Because I think that, I think of communication as the greatest gift one could have for another and could receive from another. And so I think a lot about sort of what that person needs to best feel an idea come through from my brain or heart into their brain and heart. And sometimes for someone that like has the word extraneous in their lexicon, or that's comfortable, that is the greatest pathway to their heart and brain, and with the greatest ease. Because I believe, the deeper complexity of word choice that we have, like, enables just a greater bit depth of knowledge to move from us to another and back to us. But if, for example, they're going to get stuck and be like, what does superfluous mean? Like, I don't even know what that fucking word means. And now I'm thinking about how I don't know what that word means, how stupid I am. What did he just say? Not only did he say a word I didn't know, but now I just missed the next 3 sentences because I'm thinking about how I don't know the word superfluous. And so I think a lot about how to best tailor. It takes some judgment.
Right.
It's judging and understanding what someone else wants, and it's a dance, and it can be as eloquent and as elegant as you want it to be, but like for that dance to take place requires knowing what moves your partner knows. And so I don't know, I think that to simplify and say everything needs to be like chopped down to its essence, to its core, to the most basic word, is also missing something. I think it's more of a dexterity that one has with the language to be able to know when to use what word and how.
Agreed. I loved your analogy about the dancing, and if you have to know what moves your partner knows. And I have to make a correction. It's smart brevity. Smart brevity is the name of the book. But anyway,
Okay.
I have to agree with you 100%. I love that you even make that consideration when you're writing. I don't know that I do, except that I try to make sure I'm not using big words just for the sake of using big words, but I will look for words that are lovely and sound lovely, and I think there's something to that, especially in spoken word and poetry, and so.
Sorry, just to clarify one thing, I'm speaking more of like inner, like a conversation like we're having.
Right.
If someone other than you was seated there and we were speaking and they knew different words than you did, then, which they would, I would speak to them differently. When I'm writing, I have to make a choice because I have no idea who the consumer is.
Right.
Right? Like, I have no idea who knows who's consuming that. But oftentimes, I find myself trying to stay away from the overly clever or use the Disney model, which is that the parents can enjoy certain parts of the movie that the 6-year-old can't, and vice versa.
Right.
And so, like, in my writing, I'm trying to, if I'm winking at people, it might not be everyone at once. You know what I mean? Because I realize only certain people are going to get the cleverness of saying, you know, the grass is greener and fluffier. Oh, no, of saying, of course the grass is greener and fluffier on the 7th hole of the par 4. Because I use the word course, but not as golf course. Like, that to me is like, that's just a wink that a lot of people are going to overlook, you know?
Yeah.
And if I have to explain it, that's still okay. You know what I mean? But ideally, one person's going to kind of be like, oh, I see where he didn't use golf course.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
But anyway, I cut you off. So I was just clarifying that, like, in writing for an audience that I don't know, it's different, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think you're also choosing and setting a tone to say, I'm not writing for 10-year-olds. I know that. I'm writing for people, you know what I mean? Like, people who are going to interact with my work probably have this level of comprehension. And then the other thing is, the nice part about writing is challenging someone, because did I pronounce superfluous right? Some people would say superfluous. And I don't actually know. I've never looked that up. But most of the words we know are from words we've read instead of, well, that's probably not true. Most of the words we know are probably words that we heard, and therefore we can, you know, mimic the pronunciation. But some words, like superfluous, like, I probably learned from reading, not from hearing. And that's another thing, is just like, because I wrote it in its challenging language, someone's got time and ability to look things up and to make sense of it, and then that grows their lexicon.
Right. Yeah. And I, too, there's many words in my vocabulary that came from reading and not hearing them loud. And so then I'll get caught up sometimes and, like, how do I pronounce this word? I've never said this word. I know what it means. I know the word. I like the word, but how is it pronounced?
Yeah.
You know?
I was seated today. I saw a guy who had a hat on that said Torrey Pines, which is, I think, north of San Diego, and it's in La Jolla, which is spelled Lajolla. And I, for the longest time, even living in California, like, until recently, thought it was La Jolla, legitimately. And my wife laughs her ass off, like, how would you ever think that that's how it's pronounced, considering the Spanish influence? Like, why would you think that's La Jolla? And I'm just like, I don't know. I kind of liked it better.
La Jolla does kind of connote, like, happiness.
And when people would say La Jolla, I would be like, oh, they must be talking about a different place. You know, they can't be talking about La Jolla.
Well, I will admit that I never saw it spelled. So I just assumed it was Lahoya.
Yeah.
But I took Spanish, so I might have guessed the Jolla, but I can't promise that I would. You know, they got Raleigh, you know, and all that, which is the J, you know, and all that. But yeah, I don't think I've never, like, looked at it on a map. So I don't ever, and maybe when I lived in, because I did live on the, you know, the West Coast, and I definitely, you know, drove up US 1 from LA to, you know, San Francisco and everything. Actually, even higher, Sausalito. Yeah. Maybe I just didn't even, like, make that connection. That's funny.
What do you do with words? Like, I mean, as you uncover more and more about your language of English, what do you do when you stumble across a new word? Like, are you excited?
That I don't know?
Yeah.
I look it up, and I am excited. And then I decide, is this something I really need to know? Like, is it something that, like, I'm glad to know it so if I come across it again, but is this something that I need to keep in my vocabulary? Like, will it just make other people not know what I'm talking about? Like, is this a word that has a subtle difference to other words that I want to keep it because there is no other word that's specifically this,
Yeah. Like, what place does it have?
Right.
What if, like, effectiveness does it have?
Right. Is there something I already use that's just as good and I don't need to add it?
Right.
Probably not going to add it, just glad I learned it.
Yeah.
And then there's words that are, completely other that like, now this, not sure if I'm going to pronounce this right.
Go for it.
But it's the word for the smell of rain after it rains.
Yeah.
And it's petrichor. Is that how you say it? Or core? I'm not sure. P-E-T. Petrichor. Yeah,
Petrichor.
that's what I thought it was, which I love the word. That's cool that there's a word for it. I love what it is. And then I recently found out that is because it's a certain type of release of bacteria that only we can smell as humans. And they think it's something that helped us sense where water may be close to when we were, first evolving as species. So I just think that's like really freaking cool.
Yeah.
In so many ways. And we do all seem to like that smell.
Yeah.
Like it's something that kind of unites us as a human being.
I love words like that for sure. This isn't as graceful of a word or need, but penultimate.
Yeah.
So penultimate.
Second best? Like, it's crazy.
Well, I think it's second in. Well, I guess it's second in line, like the next.
Okay.
So like, this is not our last episode, but our second to last episode.
Okay.
But does it mean second in order?
Yeah.
I believe it means second to last.
Second to last.
The ultimate would be the last.
Yeah. But these are really like, what's fascinating for me is like learning other languages. My next best language is Spanish, and it's way my sort of like abilities and faculties there are way different and less, surely, but it's amazing being in situations where I have to use only my Spanish, like with my aunt, with my wife's aunt and uncles. There's a variety, like various amounts of proficiency in English, but oftentimes when with them, even those with better English, there'll be a lot of Spanish spoken. And some uncles I'm with, it's only Spanish. And to feel like a 4-year-old, I don't even know exactly what the age would be, because I listen to 3 and 4-year-olds, I'm like, they have a bigger vocab than I do in Spanish. Like, they're better with their verbs. So let's just call it a 3-year-old. And like how neutered, how sort of impotent I am in trying to connect through language. It brings up a couple things that are interesting, but one is just like, when we're sitting here trying to figure out like what penultimate really means, like we're at a pretty high end of English sort of understanding at this point. But the best part is that, Jesus, there are so many fucking words in English we still don't know. And so like, again, what I'm in, like,
or
it's just a spectrum, or misunderstand. and so and there's just a spectrum of understanding. And then the last thing I'll say is that coming back to those times when I'm with a Spanish speaker where we can only speak in Spanish, I am so limited at expressing, talking about out-profounding one another. I'm so limited in expressing how brilliant I am, or I think I am, that I have to, like, it humbles me, and it also makes me rely on other forms of communication.
Yeah.
And instead of, communicating, it's not just like gestures, and it's not just smiles. It's a whole slew of a different like energy force field that has to come about so I can feel some semblance of human connectivity, because without my tools, I feel like an idiot carpenter,
That's got to be even more a feeling of handicap to you, because you are a man of words, and that is what you've kind of centered your life around, and to then be thrown into an intimate setting with people you care about and have that lack of ability to have that vocabulary just right there to say exactly what you want to say.
And the other thing is, not only like do I not get to be brilliant, they don't either.
Right.
Like, I don't get to understand their brilliance. I don't get to understand their jokes. My wife is probably 7 times funnier in Spanish. The way I hear people laugh at her and the way she laughs and the fun she has in her native language. I mean, she's brilliant in English, but like, I think, I don't know, there's something, so, yeah, there's something there. But I mean, coming back to Out Profound, that was really me criticizing me, and finding a sort of vapidness in an existence where I need to feel smart. Like, that's a currency. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's like, it's spending a little too much time trying to like appear, or rather to seem than to be. You know, like I'm really like, what am I doing here? Like, I thought I'm trying to transmit love, and in fact, I'm just like masturbating in front of somebody.
That's funny. I thought the same analogy. Like, in my mind, I'm like, yeah, because that's what I feel like whenever we choose that ego over a real message or a real connection and communication.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's like this masturbatory, thing of like, I'm so amazing right now. Oh my God, is everybody seeing this?
Yeah, yeah.
And
and it's such self-pleasure that's like, not regarding the interaction. It's
or
all,
even bringing in anybody else. Right.
It's like, I got myself, I'm fine. And then all you're doing is using a potential voyeur, like, in the situation, but using them to feel better about like yourself. And so like, that's Out Profound Each Other, like, to me is just is something I struggle with every day. It was interesting because you said, when you're in responding to the poem, which was great, you said, like, when someone's thinking about what they're going to say instead of listening to what someone's saying. And I'd love to hear more about that in your life, in ways that maybe you do that or don't do that or have overcome that, or what you think about, what it means, because we're actively involved in something being recorded right now.
Yeah.
That like we want to sound like at our best.
Yeah.
And so it's like, do I think about what my next move is, or do I actually just indulge in like what they're giving me right now,
I am not thinking about what I'm going to say next. I can tell you that. I've made mistakes in this talk, and I long ago, with help from my husband, gave up being perfect and answering things and doing things so perfectly and smartly. I know I'm smart. I won scholarships, like, I don't care anymore. It's, as long as I know what I know, the world can perceive me how they perceive me. That's really up to them and their business.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make mistakes. I'm human. And the thing that my husband gave me is, he found some article, and basically the point of it was, nobody fucking cares about you. Everybody is in their own fucking head about themselves. They're the star of the show.
Yeah.
And yes, you will make mistakes in front of people. Yes, you will do things, but I guarantee, like, even if you insulted somebody or whatever, they are not thinking about you an hour later. Only you are thinking about that moment. And the sooner you just like, well, that sucked. I messed that up. I had the wrong definition of a word, or I had whatever, right? And you're just like, well, I did that. I won't, learn whatever, the better, like, who am I? I don't, like, I'm not like running for office. I'm not, trying to get a job or something, like, and I do really believe what people think of me is their business. Like, even my husband or my daughter, like, it, that's their business. If they love me, or they think I'm funny, or they think I'm dumb, or they think I, don't do things right, or like I'm not talking about like moral things. I'm talking about like the way my husband would say, I'm terrible at filling our dishwasher, like.
You are or he is?
He would say I was.
Okay.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
He's got his own, thing, and I let him have it. I'm like, okay, then I'll move it the way you want it, like, or you can move it. That doesn't bother me. I'm not like, no, you have to do it my way.
Yeah.
So.
What are your thoughts on pre-rinsing?
On pre-renting?
Pre-rinsing.
Pre-rinsing, I'm mixed. It depends on the quality of your dishwasher.
Okay.
So I think you got to know your dishwasher.
Yeah.
And whether it's something that will just stay in the strain, like bone or something is just going to be at the bottom,
the
something,
filter, yeah.
Right? But so it's I kind of believe in a light rinsing. It doesn't have to be ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's the clip.
No,
I mean, if there's some wisdom that was given today or found, that was it.
So if you're not applying for a job when you're talking, right? I'm taking the politician thing right now.
Yeah.
If you're not applying for a job and you have that sort of freedom, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing when you're talking? If someone is blissfully, like, I don't know, if someone is so caught up in what they're doing and not thinking about you, what in fact are you doing?
I'm really looking to share experience and ideas. One, hoping that I might be enlightened or find something that sparks a new thing for me to think about.
Yeah.
And also the same for another, or at least sometimes even like help them if I, like maybe something that I did or said, help them look at life differently, but ultimately, I like talking to people for that.
Yeah.
Like, what do you know and what do I know? And like, what can we learn from each other? What can we have fun? And, having fun. Like, it's fun to talk to other people and get their take on things. And, I'm not going to say it's not fun to agree on some things, but I'm not looking to have the same exact view with everybody I talk to, like I actually want you to tell me something I don't know,
Yeah. Do you think that that's transactional at all? Like, the way you described it sounds very loving, but it was, I can learn something or teach something. We can make some fun. I can be challenged. Is that still transactional?
I think it is a little bit, but I think what I also forgot to mention is I really do want people's day to be better having been in interaction with me than not, and even strangers. Like, I seriously go out of my way to have real interactions with people. Like, if I'm going to compliment somebody, I'm going to look for something that I really am going to compliment them on, not just like your smile is great, like not thinking about it.
Yeah.
But also, like, especially strangers, and taking time, like with anybody people working in this store or somebody I cross on the street, that some kind of positive interaction with them, and especially women and especially girls, because I don't feel women, in my experience, and especially in past generations, I think the girls now of this newest generation, and maybe even my daughter's generation, do way better than all the previous ones of being there for other women and really, really like having each other's backs and promoting them. I think there's been a lot of competition pushed on us by society, and as a way to control us, as a way to keep us in line, because if we're fighting with each other, we're not as strong. Like, we're really fucking strong together. Yeah. And women have a lot of power that doesn't always get recognized, and the whole like compartmentalizing of girls as pretty, and this one thing is demure, and this is being ladylike, and all that bullshit that we put on little girls. I am about deconstructing. Yeah. And so I will make sure if there's a young girl like in the coffee shop that I'm in or wherever, that I catch eyes with her And if I can find a compliment that is not, oh, your dress is pretty, like, or whatever, you know, I will find a way. And I look to build up the women around me that are close to me, but also just anybody on the street, because until we start really doing that for each other, you know, we won't get where we need to go as a society, you know, until we start really having each other's backs again and really building each other up.
And I'm guessing you do what you want, what you wish would have been done for you, such that you're giving those girls the support, the eye, the compliment, the strength. I'm guessing that women before you didn't give you.
I would say I've had a mixed bag. I've had some great and do have great women in my life that are that, and I've found those communities. I seek them out. I mean, Kara's one of them, right? Yeah. I don't believe in competing with the girls around me. You look beautiful. You look amazing. You have talent. You have money. Whatever it is that somebody, you know, would say, oh, and like envy. I'm like, fuck yeah, you do. That's awesome. You know, like I want that even more in spades.
Yeah.
You have a freaking amazing science degree and you're smart as fuck and like you're funny. Fuck yeah.
When did you first realize, do you have a memory of the time you realized that, oh, this is a competition, like as a girl? Oh,
really young.
But like what?
But when I really started resisting was high school.
Yeah.
And like, so I had a group of really close friends, and I also was really severely bullied in middle school, and I had moved to a school. It was like a parochial school that went from kindergarten all the way. It was middle school to sixth, and I came in at fourth grade because my mom. I'm the oldest of 6 children. My mom was putting some of my younger siblings into that school, and she just wanted to put us all into the same school. So previous to that, it was in a public school. So she just moved all of us to that school. And I came in, and these girls who were kind of like the its of that school just decided to hate me for no reason, like day one. And they turned like the whole school, including some weird teachers, against me. Like one of the teachers that was totally cruel and mean because she was enamored with these, you know, it girls, turned out to then be a pedophile and had like a relationship with another girl in our 6th grade. Like so it was like bizarre as fuck.
Yeah.
But I remember just like they were being really mean to me and nobody would talk to me, and they would trip me in the halls and they would just do all these things, and they really had nothing of value to like be bullying me about. Like they didn't know me. And when I realized they don't know me, this is so unfounded, I was able to like find humor in it and just be like, okay. And so I started acting like that. And when they would like make fun of me, I'm like, oh, well, you know what would really be a good thing to make fun of me is this, because this is actually something I don't do well. And I just started like doing stuff like that. And as a result, some of the worst transgressors became my best friends, because they started asking me like, why are you helping us make fun of you? And I'm like, because you don't even know me. Like, you're making fun of me without having any real founding of even who I am.
I just got chills because, to interrupt you for a second, I got chills.
Please.
It seems like that is the clearest definition of why vulnerability, like, it cuts everyone down, because it's kind of like, you can't fucking hurt me. I just gave you ammunition. You don't even know how to load the gun.
Exactly. Exactly. And so humor and just having that like sense of self really like totally saved me and actually earned me friends.
Yeah.
And then in high school later, I had my core group of friends, and one of them was that girl who asked me that, you know. And I got on a bus that we all took to school, and they were all giving me the cold shoulder, and I had no fucking reason. I was like, what is going on, you know, right?
Yeah.
And come to find out that because this boy who liked me, like, I never had trouble in boy department, only in girl department. So this boy that I had been friends with my whole life, like I knew him in public school, and then now I knew him like in high school and stuff, right? Grew up in my neighborhood. One of my best friends, the one that had asked me, you know, like, why are you giving us, you know, whatever, she was in love with Eric. And I knew that. We all knew that, right? And I'd recently broken up with my boyfriend. This was after the weekend. And this is so high school. This is in a nutshell. I'd broken up with my boyfriend over the weekend. It had gotten out. And Eric had called me and asked me out. And I was like, Eric, no. You know, like, we're good friends. It might be cool to be I said, but you know, like I have friends who like you, and we've been friends too long. I don't even want to, you know, like, and I just broke up with somebody. I don't need to date anybody, kind of thing. So that was the conversation I had with Eric. But my friends had assumed, they had heard Eric was calling me. They'd assumed that I just was dating Eric, and was hurting Kathy, and that was my, like, fuck everybody moment. I was just like, if you can assume those things about me when I've never done anything like that,
Yeah.
one, it tells me your heart, because to me that's saying you would have done that. And two, that tells me you don't know me, and that you wouldn't even talk to me first, that you would just assume, right? Like that was just like a really lionizing moment for me as a person, and you know, in dealing with other women. And so I kind of divorced myself from the whole school, and like didn't interact with people for a while. Like I just, because it was, I guess I should have mentioned, it was an all-girls school. It was a like high-end school that I got in on scholarship, and I just was like, I hate women right now. I hate how women treat each other, blah, blah, blah. So it took me a while to like learn how to not have that happen again. Like, how do you make friends with people, and how do you vet them and make sure that they know you and you know them, so that those kind of assumptions and that kind of relationship where you find yourself so like maligned for no reason and misunderstood, and like that was just like that circular, like when you're like, my best friends don't know who I am, you know, like,
Yeah.
you know, you kind of question everything.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know.
And how do men benefit from these competitive battles? Like, since from Eric all the way up, you know what I mean?
I think, like, they might not every specific one, but I think what they do benefit from is if we are so worried about being the prettiest or being the whatever, you know, society wants us, and you know, competing for people's attention and all of that, we're not creating a sisterhood and a support where we have a strong voice. And so we're here now where women bodies are under the control of our government. There is no, states are deciding about our bodies and our rights, but there are no states deciding on men's rights and bodies, right? So why is that okay? You know, and why did other women vote for that to be okay? It wasn't just men who voted for that.
Right.
And continue to. So that's the long stretch, that's where it benefits men. Not all men, I'm not saying all men feel that way and want that, but there's a significant amount who do. And that's how we're here.
Yeah, I think, thank you for sharing all that. I love the high school story.
It's so funny.
And Eric told Jesse, and Jesse told Amy.
Right? It's so right. Yeah.
No, it's perfect. There's actually a beginning of a poem I want to read to you real quick.
Cool. More poems.
This is just the beginning of the poem. It's called I Bet Jesus Would Do So. A wrongly perceived right, this right, a brightly glaring light, somehow accepted here in the rarely United States, for mostly men, to decide to leave it up to the states to decide if she has the right to decide. It goes on, but I just couldn't help but share that. And just the irony. I mean, I'm interested in knowing why do you believe, like, within the context of what you were just saying, like, why does a woman vote against their choice? I mean, and we can always say, oh, well, the Bible teaches them this about, like when life happens, but like, why do you think it is, and how does that relate to the sort of like competitive aspect of the lack of solidarity that women share?
Well, I think it's this thing of you have a little bit of power in this little mediocre, low-level area where you feel like you're accepted and you're awesome, and you don't want to lose that for this risk of this bigger thing. And like, one of the things like I noticed before is that like sometimes somebody with a little bit of power but not a lot of power will lord that fucking power over you, right? And so like, for instance, have you ever been in like a bank teller that's not really the highest level in the bank,
right?
But they can sometimes be like really dismissive and whatever if you don't have the right things, or somebody at the DMV, this isn't the right paperwork, you don't have the blah, 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 goodbye, that kind of thing. Yeah. And it's, my life sucks, this is my little bit of power I get to exercise, and it's not necessarily that I don't like you, it's like, this is the one thing I get to do, and other people have done this to me, and I'm going to do it to you. In the case of the women, specifically that you asked of, voting against our own choice, I think those women, it's like the Roseanne Barr, right? Like, she just made that stupid frickin' rap pro daddy's home bullshit. She is a woman who is crass, not necessarily everybody loves her, right? Yeah. But she's found these guys that were like, you're awesome, Roseanne, and blah, blah, blah. And she's like somebody we all know, but this is happening with, everyday people who like, yeah, it's stupid that they, blah, blah, blah. And they're talking to these guys who are like, yeah, you're one of the good girls. You're doing, you get that it's all just jokes and whatever, and boys are be boys and all that. And like, yeah, and that whole thing. I think that is ultimately a big part of it. Also racism, also worried of losing, whatever money they might have, or believing that, it is the lie that it is, immigration and things that are keeping them from making the living they want to make and everything, or their men making it. But ultimately, I think it's that they feel like they're honorary members of this group, and they're supported, and they feel like some kind of power or happiness, or even some weird respect that they feel they've got maybe over other people because they're in the know and they're in the part of the joke, they're in on the joke or whatever. But ultimately I think they just don't even get, and maybe it's a little bit of what is that, I'm losing the name of it now. The syndrome when you've been a kidnapper has had you. Stockholm. Thank you. Yes.
It's
a bit of that.
I think it's they actually called it Helsinki syndrome.
Yeah.
But Stockholm is how it's known. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bit of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think coming back to the sort of the idea that for the patriarchy to function as sort of fluidly and as well as it functions, it needs less of an adversary in a group of women that support each other.
Yeah.
And I think you were talking a little bit before about, when we were talking about profound each other, it was kind of like you talked about slick politicians kind of distracting people. I think at the end of the day, like if people are if people are sort of infighting and busy with that war, and then ultimately the power structures are in a way that reward those that dissent from a greater collectivist sort of womanhood power. I mean, I think that's where you get some of those crazy voting habits that just make no sense.
Yeah.
But I want to come back to quickly the poem "The Out Profound Each Other." I want to talk about the last part of it, where we say, where we are so occupied trying to sound than trying to hear, that our companions, some friends dear, take our obsession of self to mean a neglect, to mean a disinterest, and to feel a feeling match, you both like yourselves a little less. The reason, part of the reason we went down talking about on the feminist critique and the high school stories, right, was coming from a place of, I think, you talking about wanting to make people's days a little more joyous.
Yeah.
And, that last part to me is very strongly sort of condemning the vapid act before it, because by closing by saying my self-obsession means that we feel less about ourselves after the interaction. And I guess I just wanted to talk for a second a little bit more about how, like, outside of the specific 9-year-old girl in the coffee shop, like, coming back to these communicative strategies and what it is we're actually after when we communicate, I'd love to hear a little bit more about, like, why do you want to make someone's day better? And how does that benefit both of you?
I want to make somebody's day better because I want to put positivity into the world, and I don't think enough of us in everyday life get that. I think the people who have jobs, especially that aren't a calling, they're just a job to them, right? That's how they, and there's a lot of people that have jobs that are not callings. I think that they specifically are going through their job and not getting a lot of real, true, hey, I see you, I think you're cool, like, I want to make those people have a moment in their day where it's a little easier, it's a little better to finish that day doing that job that might not be their calling, or whatever it is they're doing in the day. I just want to put that positivity out there because there's enough that's negative in the world, and we're geared, unfortunately, just because our brains have not caught up with our lives, how good we've made our lives as far as, like, not having to do, to make everything from scratch and not have to, like, be out there farming and hunting or whatever everybody, mm-hmm. and most of us have structures to take care of us, but our brains are still prehistoric kind of, and we're geared to look for the negativity because that's kind of what kept people alive in the beginning, to be aware of, like, there's an attack, or this is poisonous, or this is not a good feeling, don't go there, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm constantly trying to help us and myself, because it also, by me doing that, I'm remaining positive. It's a positive focus for me, helping to kind of go against that. And I really do feel, especially now, with all the ugliness in the world, the only way that we are going to fight it is by not mirroring it, and by being positive, and by being connected, and by reminding ourselves what is good about humanity and what is good about even strangers on the street, like, not just your little hub. And the more that, small little actions can change somebody's day. And so I don't look at myself as, like, look at me. I just see it as, like, why can't I? it's such a small thing, and I'm going to interact with people anyway. So why not make my focus positive? And maybe I did change somebody's day, and that's awesome. You know?
Do you believe like that there's altruism there, or you believe that is self-serving?
No, it's funny you say that word. That was like been one of my favorite words since I was 7 or 8, because now I'm a recovering Catholic. I believe that we're connected, and I believe there's some kind of something in the world. I do believe there's more than us that we can perceive and know. But I don't ascribe to any particular God or religion, because I feel like those are man-made, and I do believe that it's the opium of the masses, and it's used more to control people than to help people. That being said, I grew up working in the church and doing a bunch of things, and I was on a retreat with a Jesuit priest that was visiting our Catholic church, and he was just like, we were talking, and he was just like, to our group, he's like, I want to say that I think Lisa is altruistic. Everything that Lisa does and says seems to be altruistic. And he said to the group, it was all a bunch of 7, 8-year-olds, and he's like, does anybody know what altruistic mean? We didn't, and he explained it to us. And that, I was like, yeah, I like that. I think that is going to be my thing. And then it just kind of stuck. Like, it's been a word like I think about all the time. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's funny you use that word.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We all have our sort of like definitions in how we use these words. I think the semantics of the word are really tricky, largely because I think of the word meaning to do something for no benefit to myself, but to benefit others. Is how I think of the definition. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's somewhere close to that. In essence, I'm doing things for you, opening the door for you, but not because it makes me look good as a guy who opens doors for people. But what's amazing is that I find myself in this place of, I don't believe there's no altruism, and I don't believe there is altruism. I believe that there's something which is kind of what you were describing, which is simply the universe like operates on a certain like positive vibration. And so like my existence in this oh so rotten world is sort of commensurate with what I put out and what I put into this thing. And people can call that karma, whatever, right? But ultimately, I'm going to attract those that are at that sort of level. And so I'm going to attract people who do nice things for other people too, if I'm doing nice things for those others. And so, again, I don't believe it is self-serving nor altruistic. I believe it is just survival. And I believe it's surviving in this world. It is really understanding how to best navigate like serving and being served. And in creating symbiosis, I mean, that's the greatest sort of story in love story in my mind of biological systems, ecological systems, is the symbiosis between organisms. And I think like the symbiosis between people is really like to give and to receive. And so, I don't know, I believe I give what I feel is necessary to keep me feeling like stable and buoyant. And yeah, that's really why I asked that question, was just because the semantics of altruism is kind of tricky. And I think for someone to do something for no benefit to themselves is lying. I mean, that's how I truly believe that there has to be a value to it. And if for no other value, then like I live in a safer, more positive world, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one, I have to say that if we're talking semantics, I was not using altruism in that extreme sense of, and I, like you, do not believe that that's even possible or should be the aim, to do everything without thought of self or for no benefit of self.
Yeah.
To me, that's martyrdom.
Yeah.
And I don't see a lot of value in martyrdom.
Yeah.
What you were talking about, and you had mentioned earlier, you'd asked me, are your exchanges transactional? Yeah, I think they are, and I love that you use the giving and receiving, because that's exactly what we're all doing. Do you think the weather and time would permit one more thing that I think goes with this little story?
I got a lot of IS and a lot of keep on.
Okay, great. So while we were just having this conversation, you were talking about what altruism it really means, and that's not really your goal, and that you think it's more about the positive energy and acting in that, creating that positive place that we're all interacting in, and that energy reminds me of I was having a conversation in a Raku class I took this summer, and we were talking about animals, which made me bring up Vast Universe, this book that I'm reading that I love, and it basically is talking about what scientists called an umwelt, and an umwelt is the sensory world of an organism. And basically their world can be so vastly different how they perceive Earth to us, depending on what kind of chemical and physical senses that they have, and the level of their senses. Like butterflies, for instance, have a whole nother, like we see in 3D, they see in what's 4D, and they can't even explain it because they're seeing all these colors and different bands of color that we don't see, like ultraviolet and stuff, that they can't even show you what they think it looks like because we couldn't see it, and but they know from being able to put those wavelengths on something, and the butterflies find it, that they can do it, right? So it's all these different experiences of different organisms explained, and it's fascinating, and it brings even more empathy for everything around you, and just kind of also gives you such a appreciation for our world in a whole different way, because you're hearing about things that you didn't even know are out there, that other things can perceive, right? That you're not ever thinking about, and just like, it's crazy. So I was telling them about that, and then I was telling them that made me think of this experience I had when I helped some beached whales when I lived in Key West. And it was basically this pod of whales that they had gotten divers to come and help lift it was the father in the pod was not breathing, was not coming to the surface. They didn't know if it was like a voluntary, involuntary, like he just wanted to die, or if he just didn't have the strength. But anyway, divers were getting in the water, surrounding him and lifting him. But before we got in the water, they had beached themselves, and they had corralled this pod of whales into this old, it wasn't a hotel, it was something like else on the water that had its own lagoon. So they were able to put them in the lagoon, and it had a big hall, kind of like Dirty Dancing, like this big hall, and they had all the divers there for this shift that I was in, and there was like 4 marine biologists. And one marine biologist gets up, and it was like boot camp. He's like, listen, those whales hate us because they know what we're doing to the world. They hate you. They know you suck. And they're like, but they're amazing creatures, and they are so smart, they can see your thoughts. And I don't want any of you getting in the water unless you have beautiful, positive thoughts the whole time. Don't even, if you can't, I don't want you thinking about them dying. I don't want you thinking about, you need to have the best energy. They can see your thoughts, and that's almost as good as medicine. So you better make sure you're in the right frame of mind. It was like, okay, it was like really like serious. And they're like, we think they see your thoughts like holograms and blah, 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 right? So I got in the water when it was finally my turn, and I was right under, they called him Elvis, they had dubbed him Elvis. I was right under his left pectoral fin, and I'm thinking beautiful thoughts and blah, 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 and then all of a sudden I feel his heartbeat, and it was like transformative, like, oh my God, yes, this is another fucking mammal, like there's this heartbeat. And it was just this like moment of like, we're mammals and I love you and I'm, you know, like I hope you survive and all this stuff. And just as I like had that moment of thinking of his heartbeat, he kind of turned slightly, like rocked, and opened his eye and looked right at me. And I was just like, holy shit, right? You know, like it was just like, whoa, what the fuck just happened there? Like, anyway, so I was telling them this whole thing, like, who knows? Like maybe, you know, now that I'm reading this book, like I kind of saw it as like this hokey pokey kind of like way of explaining intelligence. But now that I'm reading this book on welts, and there's so many things that animals and things perceive that we have no idea, or that we're still learning about, some we know, some we don't. Who's to say fucking whales don't fucking see our thoughts as holograms? And maybe our collective consciousness and the positivity or negativity that we're putting in the world does affect whales and does affect our world. And so if that's not a fucking reason to be positive, but I still swear like a sailor, then I don't know what is, you know?
Thanks.
It's truly great. Thank you.
Oh my God.